let me take you to a moment that quietly shaped me. Not in some dramatic or mystical way, but in a deeply human one. A few years ago, I experienced what many would call a spiritual shift. It didn't happen in the mountains or during a ceremony. It came suddenly one morning, right after I had a panic attack. For years, I had been pursuing success, chasing recognition, building what others would call a good life. From the outside, everything looked right, but inside, I was running on empty. I felt numb, exhausted. One day I dropped to the floor in my apartment, not out of pain, but out of nothingness. I couldn't cry. Something inside had broken, open. That night, I sat alone, no music, no screens, just my breath. Something began to change after that. A strange calm entered my days, as if the inner noise had finally quieted. At first it felt like peace, but underneath the quiet came something else, a still, echoing emptiness. I stopped caring about ambitions, goals, accomplishments, and I thought, what's happening to me? I wasn't sad. I wasn't afraid. I simply no longer felt the urge to chase. That's when I began to understand something profound. After awakening, many people feel their drive fade away. It's not because they're lazy. It's because the soul starts to reject what once fueled them. The games, the rewards, the validation, all of it no longer fits. You're not broken. You're transforming. Today, let's explore why that internal fire seems to go dim after an awakening, and why that's exactly what's meant to happen. If you've been feeling detached, uninspired, or uncertain about your place in the world, this message is for you. Not to rekindle the old motivation, but to ignite something far deeper, a flame that rises from within, not from pressure. Let's talk about the death of hustle and the emergence of true purpose. One of the most unsettling changes that happens after a spiritual awakening is the collapse of the version of yourself that once operated on fear, ego, and needing approval. It's like waking up one day and realizing the person who used to care so deeply about achievements, status, and praise no longer exists. That realization is both freeing and terrifying, because the energy that once got you out of bed, the anxiety, the proving, the comparing, it's gone. And you wonder, what now? You used to run faster than your pain. You used to hustle so hard because you believed your worth depended on your productivity. But after awakening, that voice inside you goes silent, not because you failed, but because your soul no longer believes that lie. The engine that once drove your self-worth stalls. The fear-based ambition dissolves. And suddenly, the 16-hour days and the constant self-judgment no longer feel possible or even relevant. What you're experiencing isn't collapse, it's emergence. You're not lazy, you're healing. The version of you that needed achievement to escape emptiness is dissolving, and what's left behind is unfamiliar space, like floating with no direction. But that stillness is sacred. It's not the end, it's the beginning. This is the death of the ego's script and the slow birth of a deeper self. A self that doesn't need to prove, a self that doesn't force movement, a self that invites inspiration. So if you're sitting in that in-between, wondering where your ambition went, don't panic. The version of you that thrived on hustle has crumbled. That's a blessing, because what's being born in its place won't need pressure. It will be rooted in peace. This isn't a wrong turn. This is the path. Another surprising shift after awakening is the way your relationship with doing, especially productivity, completely changes. Before this transformation, your self-worth may have been tied to your output, how much you achieved, how busy you were, how many tasks you completed. But after awakening, something no longer clicks. The drive to hustle fades. You try to push yourself, and it feels heavy. You sit at your desk, and instead of urgency, you feel fog.com, but also unsettled. You're not burned out. You're not stuck. You're simply no longer willing to perform from the old energy. And that stillness, It's not stagnation. It's realignment. You think you're falling behind. You wonder if you've lost your fire. But what's actually happening is something powerful. You've stopped rushing. You've stopped performing. You've stopped chasing. Your soul no longer wants productivity. It wants presence. Where you once believed that pressure created momentum, now you realize that clarity does. Stillness isn't laziness. It's an intelligent pause. It's like the quiet of winter. Nothing may seem to grow above the surface, but deep underground, the roots are expanding, the foundation is deepening, and something sacred is taking shape. But because we live in a world addicted to speed and noise, we're conditioned to fear the pause. We equate silence with failure. We panic when we rest. But not every season is meant to produce. Some seasons are meant to become. When your mind slows and you're no longer fueled by fear, you create the space for alignment to rise. That's when real insight shows up. That's when intuition grows louder than anxiety. That's when your steps become intentional, not impulsive. Stillness, after awakening, is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of conscious living. The only difference now is that your actions are no longer powered by panic or ego. They arise from listening. So if you find yourself in a quiet phase, stop calling it a setback. You're not falling behind. You're sinking deeper into truth. And that doesn't require speed. It requires honesty. Stillness is no longer the enemy. It's the doorway. One of the hardest truths to accept after an awakening is this. The goals you once obsessed over no longer move you. The money, the titles, the upgrades, the applause, the things that once lit a fire in you, now feel strangely hollow. Not because they changed, but because you did. You might look at the same milestones that used to make your heart race and feel ... nothing. And that can be incredibly confusing. These goals still look impressive. Society still celebrates them. Your old self would have done anything to get them. But now, when you imagine chasing them, there's no spark. You haven't lost your ambition. You've just outgrown the illusions that fueled it. The truth is, most of your previous desires were driven not by authenticity, but by the ego's hunger for safety, validation, comparison, and belonging. You were following a script written by a world that taught you what to want. You didn't chase those goals because they aligned with your soul. You chased them because they were loud and popular. Now, something has shifted. The veil has lifted. You can see the game for what it is, and the emptiness behind those shiny dreams can no longer be ignored. You can't pretend anymore. You can't fake excitement over things that no longer resonate. And though it may feel like a death, this is actually the birth of something much more true. This is your chance to set a new compass, one based not on image, but on integrity. The challenge is, during this phase, most people mistake the absence of ambition for failure. They panic because they think they've lost their edge. But what's really happening is this: your inner compass is being rebuilt. Your reasons are changing. Your why is being rewritten. You're no longer chasing just to chase. You're asking deeper questions now. And that's exactly what should be happening. This isn't the end of your motivation, it's a refinement of it. You're now being invited to create goals that reflect who you truly are, not who the world expected you to be. This doesn't mean you won't strive. It means you'll strive differently. Your fire won't come from proving your worth. It will come from expressing your truth, from serving something real. So if your old dreams don't excite you anymore, let them go. You're not giving up. You're coming home. You're not losing drive. You're shedding illusion. And what rises in its place will carry you much further than the old rewards ever could. Transformation, real spiritual transformation, doesn't begin with arrival. It begins with dissolution. You don't leap from caterpillar to butterfly in one motion. There is a sacred middle, and that middle is uncomfortable. Before anything new can emerge, you must become nothing at all. You may feel like you're falling apart, but what's really happening is that you're being unmade. Everything you built from fear, comparison, performance, it's all melting away. The roles, the routines, the rush, none of them hold anymore. You're in between, you're in the cocoon, and in the cocoon, nothing is clear. You lose form, you lose certainty, you lose momentum. You feel like a formless soup, unable to go back, unsure how to move forward. From the outside, it looks like stillness, dormancy, maybe even failure, but inside, the miracle is unfolding. Your soul is reconstructing your identity from the ground up, and that can't be rushed. You want to move, you want to build, you want to make sense of things, but your spirit is whispering, wait, don't force, don't flee, just be, let it happen. The old version of discipline, the one built on pushing and punishing yourself, doesn't work here. In this phase, you don't need control, you need surrender. You're not stuck, you're being softened, you're not behind, you're being rebuilt. It may feel like you've lost your edge, but what you're actually losing is the pressure that once drove you into burnout. And what's emerging is something much more sustainable. A life not powered by fear, but by presence. This time in the cocoon is not a mistake. It's a requirement. Every seed is buried before it blooms. Every butterfly lives in the dark before it flies. This quiet is not the end of you. It's the preparation for your next evolution. So don't judge this phase. Don't rush through it. Don't call it lazy or lost. Call it what it is, sacred becoming. Your wings are being formed in silence. Another raw truth that awakens after a spiritual shift is this. You can no longer fake, and not your joy, not your drive, not your relationships. You used to be able to smile your way through what drained you, to perform your roles, to grind through jobs and friendships that didn't nourish your spirit. But now, you just can't. It's not that you've become weak, it's that your soul has grown strong enough to refuse inauthenticity. There's a new boundary forming inside you, a kind of energetic line that says, no more. No more pretending. No more pushing through. No more being someone else to fit in, and that can be terrifying. Because often, it means letting go of things you once relied on. It means walking away from paths that once felt like progress. It means releasing people who once felt like home. It might look like quitting a job that no longer resonates, even if it paid well. It might mean outgrowing relationships that no longer reflect your values. It might look like sitting in stillness, because the next path hasn't fully revealed itself. But this collapse is not a problem. It's the sign that your inner compass is finally working. You are no longer willing to live in fragments. You are being called to full alignment. And alignment doesn't always look impressive. It might not come with applause, but it comes with peace. It comes with clarity. It comes with power. You're no longer interested in impressing people. You're interested in honoring your truth. And that's when real motivation returns. Not from hype or hustle, but from harmony. Once your soul begins to lead, you no longer force momentum. You become momentum. You no longer perform for acceptance. You live from authenticity. This is the gift of awakening, the end of the mask, the end of pretending, and the beginning of living in full alignment with who you're truly meant to be. One of the most startling shifts that happens after a spiritual awakening is how your definition of success completely changes. The ladder you've been climbing suddenly seems like it was leaning against the wrong wall. The followers, the awards, the lifestyle, they still exist, but now they seem strangely distant, like reaching for something that no longer carries flavor. And it's not because success is wrong, it's that your soul no longer craves the version of success you were taught to want. You start seeing clearly how much of what you were chasing was designed by someone else. It was about quantity, not quality, about image, not essence. You were told that more meant better, that applause meant value, that constant striving meant worth. But now, a quiet voice inside you whispers, there must be something more. You start craving depth over display, integrity over image, peace over performance. That inner shift can be disorienting, especially in a world that still celebrates the old metrics. You'll still see others winning awards, gaining followers, flaunting wealth. You'll still hear society whispering, push harder, go faster, be more. But meanwhile, you sit in stillness and ask, what actually matters to me? That question becomes the compass, and as the external validation fades, a new kind of motivation begins to rise. You find yourself energized not by likes or attention, but by meaningful action, by quiet service, by living in alignment, by doing work that feeds your spirit, even if no one claps. You begin to realize that success isn't something to chase, it's something to live. It becomes less about achievement and more about authenticity, less about what you've done and more about who you've become. You don't want to look accomplished, you want to feel whole. So, if your ambition has dimmed, take a closer look. Maybe it's not gone, maybe it's just evolving. Maybe you're no longer seeking to impress, maybe you're ready to express. And that is a deeper form of success. Ask yourself, what version of success am I still trying to uphold? If it's not built from soul, it's safe to let it go. The path ahead is not about proving yourself. It's about becoming yourself, fully, honestly, and with clarity. Before awakening, discipline often felt like war, a constant battle between what you wanted and what you thought you should want. You forced yourself to act. You barked orders at your own mind. You drove your body past exhaustion and called it strength. You believed that if you just pushed harder, you'd finally be enough. And in a way, it worked. You got things done. You checked boxes. You even earned praise. But underneath it all, there was fatigue. Discipline rooted in punishment eventually robs the soul. But awakening changes the game. The old kind of discipline starts to feel foreign. You try to return to routines, to hustle, to structure, but something inside resists. The force is gone, the fire is quiet, and you wonder if you've lost your edge. You haven't. You've simply outgrown the whip. What's rising in its place is a different kind of strength, not force, but devotion. Devotion doesn't scream at you to act. It gently pulls you toward what matters. It doesn't guilt you into effort. It invites you into alignment. You no longer act out of fear. You act from truth. And from that space, discipline becomes softer, but more sustainable. You show up because your soul is stirred, not because you're afraid of falling behind. You work because your work is sacred. You rest because your body is wise. You move because your heart says, now. This kind of discipline doesn't collapse under pressure. It thrives in presence. It doesn't depend on external rewards. It's fueled by internal resonance. But living this way takes trust. It means you must stop measuring yourself by output. You must learn to listen, not just to your schedule, but to your spirit. It means honoring your energy, honoring your boundaries, honoring your gifts, even when no one else sees them. So, if you feel like your discipline has disappeared, look deeper. What's really happening is that your willpower is being replaced by wisdom. You're no longer here to dominate your life. You're here to partner with it. This is the new discipline, devotion to what is real, reverence for your purpose, and commitment to truth that doesn't require shouting. And yes, it may look less impressive to the outside world, but to your soul, it is power. Pure and clear. That strange fog you're in, the fatigue, the emptiness, the disconnection from your old motivations. It might look like burnout, but it's not. It's something more sacred. You're not broken. You're being rewired. After awakening, your entire system begins to shift. Mentally, emotionally, energetically. Even your nervous system starts adjusting. Before, your body and mind were programmed for survival, for stress, stimulation, constant action. That's what kept you going. That's what kept you producing. But now, your inner wiring is being reconfigured. You're learning how to move not from panic, but from presence. Not from urgency, but from clarity. And that shift doesn't happen instantly. It's not like flipping a switch. It's more like learning to breathe all over again. Every habit, every pattern, every instinct that once drove you is now under renovation. The system that once operated on adrenaline is being replaced by one that listens for alignment. You no longer have the energy for things that drain you. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. You no longer find comfort in chaos. That's not laziness. That's healing. You're learning how to move from the inside out, not the outside in. And yes, that means there will be days where you feel like doing nothing. That's part of the upgrade. Your energy is being purified. Your actions are being recalibrated. What once felt urgent may now feel irrelevant, and that's okay. You're shedding the habits of survival. You're making space for truth. You're no longer willing to hustle just to avoid feeling lost. You'd rather sit in uncertainty than act out of fear. And that's progress. Real, deep, irreversible progress. So the next time you feel that quiet, that silence, don't rush to fill it. Let it speak. Let it teach. Motivation will return, but not as caffeine, not as pressure. It will return as alignment, as that sacred inner pull that feels like both clarity and peace. You're not shutting down. You're leveling up. You're not running out of fuel. You're discovering a cleaner fire, one that burns gently, but powerfully. From within, one of the greatest misconceptions about spiritual awakening is that it's about escaping life. That once you awaken, you detach, check out, float away into some peaceful realm untouched by reality. But the truth is far more grounded and far more challenging. Awakening isn't about running from the world. It's about returning to it with different eyes. What you lose after awakening isn't your motivation. It's your attachment to empty pursuits. You're not giving up. You're redirecting. You're not disengaging. You're choosing with intention. Your soul starts to say no to the things that once kept you busy, but unfulfilled. The shallow goals, the compulsive achievements, the hollow rush. Not because you failed, but because your inner compass is pointing to something real. It's like a river that once ran into a dry desert, now being rerouted toward fertile soil. That change is jarring. It feels like something is missing. But what's really happening is your life is being repurposed, redirected toward contribution, connection, and clarity. This isn't withdrawal. This is deeper engagement. Not with noise, but with truth. The discomfort you feel now, the confusion, the disinterest, the stillness, it's not regression. It's redirection. It's the sacred clearing of what no longer aligns, making space for your authentic path to emerge. And here's the thing. Your true calling isn't always flashy. It may not come with applause. It might be subtle, quiet, gentle, a nudge toward service, a pull toward creativity, a deep desire to live from love, not lack. This kind of motivation doesn't explode into your life. It whispers, it stirs, it invites you to show up with presence instead of pressure. So if you feel like your fire has gone out, take heart. You're not losing motivation. You're aligning with meaning. You're preparing not to escape life, but to serve it, fully, consciously, and from your deepest truth. That's the real essence of awakening, to live in the world, but from the soul, clear, kind, and awake. There's one final truth that reveals itself after awakening, and it's this. Much of what we called motivation before was never truly motivation at all. It was dependency. It was addiction. Addiction to striving, to approval, to productivity, to being seen, needed, admired. We weren't always chasing what mattered. We were often just trying to feel safe, trying to be enough, trying to stay busy so we wouldn't have to sit in silence and ask the harder questions. So we ran, we worked, we climbed, we pushed, not because we were inspired, but because we were afraid to stop. That cycle is what awakening comes to disrupt. It pulls back the curtain. It shows you how much of your energy was tied to fear. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You realize that willpower alone cannot sustain you. Hype wears off. Hustle breaks down. Achievement without alignment leaves you empty. So what rises in its place? Alignment, a new kind of drive that doesn't rush, but flows. That doesn't chase, but listens. That doesn't exhaust, but nourishes. When you begin acting from alignment, something profound happens. Your energy feels cleaner. Your choices feel clearer. Your steps feel lighter. You begin to notice that effort no longer comes from pressure. It comes from purpose. You're no longer doing things out of fear of falling behind. You're doing them because they resonate with your truth. And that shift changes everything. Instead of seeking validation, you seek integrity. Instead of being driven by comparison, you're guided by connection to your values, your gifts, your soul's unique rhythm. You start trusting the timing of your life. You no longer need to control everything. You become available to the unfolding. And the unfolding becomes sacred. But this shift doesn't happen overnight. It takes patience. It takes unlearning. It takes sitting in the quiet long enough to hear your own voice again. You'll learn to trust the subtle signs, the quiet pull, the small moments of clarity that whisper, "This is the way." You begin to act, not because you must, but because you're moved to. Not because someone else expects it, but because it feels right. That is the difference between addiction and alignment. And when you live from alignment, motivation returns. But it's different now. It's not the kind that burns you out. It's the kind that lights you up. It's the difference between being pushed and being called. So if you're wondering where your drive went, ask yourself, was it ever truly yours? Or was it borrowed from fear, from culture, from survival? Because the motivation you're about to discover now will be yours in full. It won't need noise. It won't need validation. It will rise from the center of who you are, and it will carry you farther than any external push ever could. This is not the death of your fire. It's the birth of your flame. Quiet, clear, unwavering. So don't rush back to who you were. That version of you served a purpose. And now, it's time for a different kind of becoming. Let this space you're in be sacred. Let this pause be holy. You're not lost. You're being recentered. You're not falling behind. You're being called deeper. You're not broken. You're being rebuilt. And when the time is right, you will move again, not with pressure, but with presence. Not to prove, but to embody. Not for applause, but for truth. Because now, the path isn't about how much you can achieve. It's about how fully you can live soul-aligned, heart-lit, and rooted in what truly matters. This is the essence of awakened motivation. Not a sprint, not a performance, but a sacred rhythm, true to your being, true to your purpose, and true to your peace.